Hi, everybody. Welcome back. So, in our previous lecture, we were discussing how digestion and metabolism create energy in animal bodies and how we are able to break down macro and use micronutrients in metabolism and specifically the chemical reactions that are occurring in the human body. So now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking more specifically at energy flow, and we're going to also going to be looking at energy transfer in plants because again, plants, as we know, are getting the majority of their nutrients very differently than animals would, and with the bulk of it coming from the process of photosynthesis. So we're going to look specifically how that transfers uh, and how energy flow and energy dynamics work in plants. So the driving questions that we're going to be going over in this lecture are specifically what are photosynthetic organisms and why are they so important? And we've sort of touched on this in our plant lectures previously, but we're going to talk a little bit more chemically at what is going on with plants and how energy flow and systems work within plant organisms. Second, we're going to sort of talk more generally about energy. What are different types of energy and what transformations of energies do organisms carry out? And lastly, we're going to look at how do plants and algae convert the energy in sunlight into energy-rich organic materials, and why don't humans do this? And specifically in your quiz this week, I'm going to have you watch a video that's going to look at the process of photosynthesis um, and what is happening again at the chemical level and how are plants able to create and use energy. So, in your book this week, the way that this chapter frames understanding energy transfer is looking at biofuels and specifically using algae to make fuel. So algae, as we've sort of discussed in previously, are known, for being red, green, or brown hues, and they have this ability to capture the energy of sunlight and convert it into usable forms of energy through the process of photosynthesis. And uh, um, much is in the forms of these oils that is really ideally suited to making different types of fuel. So we've been talking a lot about energy and how the body creates energy, but we haven't really discussed scientifically what energy actually means. So energy is simply the capacity to do work. It is the process of building complex molecules and moving substances in and out of cells. Without sources of energy, all life would stop on Earth. And the largest energy source that we have here on Earth is the sun. And this is really just, sort of a brief review. You've probably all have had are aware of the first law of thermodynamics, where energy cannot be created or destroyed, and that humans and other animals obtain energy by eating food, and that's what we've been discussing in our previous lectures, looking at digestion and metabolism, and all of this is forms of chemical energy. And chemical energy is essentially potential energy that is stored within the bonds of biological molecules. Sorry, had a little bit of trouble with Kaltura there. Um, but what we're discussing here is exactly what is chemical energy. And chemical energy is the potential energy that's stored within the bonds of biological molecules. And we saw how some of that played out when we were looking at our enzymatic reactions. When we break those bonds, we release that stored energy, and then that energy is able to do work. So previously we looked at how that process happens with digestion and metabolism, but now we're going to start thinking about it in terms of photosynthesis. So how do plants go about capturing energy? So again, you've probably all had classes about photosynthesis, but what we're going to try and frame photosynthesis as is this a way of capturing energy and understanding how this energy capture is happening at a chemical level. Very briefly, photosynthesis is simply the process by which plants and other autotrophs, again, things that are making their own food, use sunlight to create energy rich molecules. It's using carbon dioxide and water, um, sunlight, to create oxygen and glucose. So when we're thinking about the types of autotrophs that can photosynthesize, we're talking primarily about plants, but we're also talking about algae and even some bacteria, which we spoke about before, cyanobacteria, and also some protists are able to use photosynthesis. So let's look big picture what photosynthesis is doing. It's using sunlight to create chemical energy, and then that energy is able to be used quickly and power the cellular functions. It can also be stored um, in some molecules such as oil, and this is what is creating biofuels. And then lastly, it's sort of in cell structures. So some of this chemical energy is used as building blocks for those cell structures. So again, sort of thinking about photosynthesis not just as sort of like this rote um, chemical formula, which you've all probably seen and discussed before, but thinking of it in terms of this energy transfer and how that energy is then used, either usable energy, stored energy, or to create cellular structures. So let's look at photosynthesis and what's happening and where photosynthesis is occurring within the plant cell. So we've talked about these specialized organelles called chloroplasts in our previous lectures. And these are where photosynthesis takes place. Now, photosynthesis is really divided into two steps. There's the photo step and the synthesis step. And this photo step is really talking about where we're using sunlight to, and as the chemical reaction is occurring, we're able to split out water and create this oxygen byproduct. And then the second part of this is the synthesis step. So now that we have this chemical energy that we've created, we're able to start to synthesize the energy, the captured energy, and convert CO2 into the energy-rich sugar glucose. So that's really what we're talking about chemically with photosynthesis. And what we're going to dive into in our next lecture is looking more specifically at these individual steps and understanding what is going on to create this really remarkable transfer of energy that's happening within these plant cells. Okay, see you soon.